How's it going, YouTube? Welcome to Anime Bar Lounge. Today we are talking about some manga on Monday. So we're starting our One Piece journey with our One Piece reread. So I've just reread Volume 1, that's chapters 1 through 8. So for most of my One Piece history, I've been an anime watcher. I've been a manga reader for the past couple years, but I started almost 10 years ago. So 2014, I believe, was when I started watching One Piece. And it's always interesting to go back because the anime and the manga do some of the early stuff a lot different. They sequence it differently. So if you are familiar with the anime, you'll know that first episode covers the Alvida stuff, but in the manga, what we actually start with is the Shanks backstory. Right after we start with the opening with Gold Roger, where he's getting executed and he announces that he's willing to tell the world where his treasure is. All they have to do is go find it. It's in the Grand Line. And that sets in motion this great age of piracy. I would say that the start of the story has a really great hook. When I first watched One Piece, I was very skeptical. So while there was a good hook to it, I didn't truly get into it until probably like 40 episodes in, maybe more like 30, probably around Baradier. But it'll be cool on a reread because there will be things that I can appreciate more. So I'll try to be fair. But on the note of a hook, I really think that the scene of Luffy stabbing himself is metal as fuck and should have been kept in the anime, not only for the first episode, but also just if they didn't want to do the Shanks backstory first. By memory, they got rid of that. Like, I think they show it later in like a flashback in like somewhere in the hundreds, but in the original airing of the Shanks backstory, completely missing. I think it's a very good hook. I think it shows Luffy's determination, and I think it's just an interesting way to really get his character across, that he's willing to do kind of anything to achieve his goals, even from a young age. And I always love going back and seeing Shanks' crew because they're obviously pretty strong. Like, we get that impression very early, but a lot of them just kind of like you got the big dude and Shanks. They're both pretty much goobers. I would say the only like no nonsense guy like that isn't generic is Ben Beckman, the first mate. I really like Shanks' design. I think it oozes a lot of character designs. I think it's a good first example of Oda's masterful character design. I know a lot of people complain about the art style, which is a fair complaint. It's kind of jarring when you first get into it, but once you get past that, I actually feel like the ceiling for some of Oda's designs is insane. I think it can be a little challenging to get iconic characters, especially when your series spans for so long, so it's cool that he's able to achieve that even early on. There's very little characters other than females. He sometimes has a hard time with females. It's very difficult. There's very few characters that are hard to distinguish between. And really, I just got to give praise to the first chapter. The first chapter does a lot of great build-up. It introduces a lot of themes, a lot of morals. I really like the sort of message that Shanks gets across, where he gets beaten up and bodied by the mountain bandits, and he just doesn't fight back because he knows that escalating the conflict will just cause trouble for more people. But it isn't until they harm someone he cares about that he steps in and starts fighting back and retaliating and fatally wounding them, because, you know, he doesn't care if he gets alcohol spilled on him or if he's forced to clean up a mess. That's something that he can just shrug off. But if anyone harms his friends, like, I know it's a little cheesy, but to me that's like powerful stuff and something I vibe with, and something that as someone who can be a bit of a hothead sometimes, something I take to heart, because I try not to meet, you know, people often will try to like goad you in life or troll you or whatever, so I think that is a good message to like try not to like stoop to their level unless it's absolutely necessary. And Luffy's someone that needs to learn that lesson too, and here in the backstory he hasn't learned that yet. He goes to pick a fight with the mountain bandits, which just escalates things, and it's right after the initial confrontation we get the reveal that he ate the Gomu Gomu fruit, which means that he's made of rubber, which means he can never swim, which ruins his chances of becoming a pirate initially, because we realize he can't swim. And so that means that if he does want to continue being a pirate, he now has this weakness that he has to overcome. And it's a pretty cool power system, in my opinion, that it comes with a Achilles heel in a world where most people are sea roaming, whether you're a pirate or you're part of the Navy or Marines. You're going to be on the waters. So a devil fruit gives you these really cool powers, but it inherently also produces a limiting factor as well. We get this really cool scene where the mountain bandit takes Luffy out to sea and this giant fucking sea monster just appears and kind of just bodies the whole situation. And Shanks just appears, the badass as he is, saving Luffy, and basically lost an arm in saving him, but he just kind of stares at the monster and rolls for intimidation and gets a nat 20, and so the monster goes and hecks off. So after they scare off the sea monster, they go back to land, and Shanks is bidding everyone farewell because he's going to continue his voyage and leave the village for good this time, and Luffy declares that he's going to be king of the pirates, so Shanks leaves his treasure, the straw hat, with him, and that's how Luffy becomes Straw Hat Luffy, with the promise that he's going to return that straw hat to Shanks one day when he becomes a great pirate. That ends Luffy's backstory, and then we get to begin the series in the current timeline. This is where a lot of you are probably more familiar if you started with the anime. This is the almost point for point the Alvita's first episode, only with there's no cruise ship present, there's no Nami present. That's just sort of in the first episode, I guess, to like introduce Nami early, I guess, to like introduce more of the cast quickly to like try and gauge people's interest if they started with the anime. But it ends up being a very minor omission if you're reading the manga, and I think it also leads to better pacing because this is a very quick, we're introduced to Kobe's under the reign of Alvita. Luffy, by being present, gives Kobe the courage to stand up to Alvita. Alvita is this terrifying force of nature if you're a normal person in the East Blue, but Luffy, both by having trained over these past few years and being made of rubber, she's not a threat to him at all. He just punches her away and then she's gone, and then Luffy demands a little dinghy ship, and then he and Kobe sail onward, and Kobe also talks about how he wants to be a Marine, and how he, even though that would mean that he would be opposing Luffy, who is in a sense his savior in this moment, just introduces another concept of living for your dreams against all odds, and also kind of sprinkles in some morally gray stuff, which is going to end up being some of my favorite stuff in the story. Is how you have corrupt pirates, you have good pirates, you have corrupt Marines, you have good Marines. It really helps to not have the story that's just black and white. You can really get into all these factions and characters. You can do a deep dive on their morality, and reflect it on your own morality and belief in life, and you can end up relating to people even if they're the scum of the earth, or you can hate someone but kind of see where they're coming from. It's pretty cool. It's not on it's surface level now, but later on it gets much better, and I just appreciate where it's lighter now, because in my opinion, it's good storytelling to build a crescendo more times than not, and in this series that crescendo has to be a slow burn because of how long it is, but it ends up being worth it because you do get payoffs, usually arc to arc, but the first arcs are very snappy. We're practically just fighting Saturday morning cartoons for the first couple arcs, and so this first manga chapter is mostly just that. We beat the mountain bandits in Shank's story, then we beat Alvita in this one, and then in the third one we fight Axe Hand Morgans. Next chapter that we're going to talk about, we get introduced to Zoro. Zoro is this revered, infamous pirate hunter, and Luffy's determined to make him join his crew because of course he is, and Luffy doesn't take no for an answer when they first meet Zoro because of course he doesn't. He just wants to have him join his crew, and as long as he's not a bad guy, he's totally down to have him be present. Zoro wants nothing to do with it. Zoro's technically an upstanding citizen, other than the fact that he beat the shit out of the captain of this naval base, son, Helmeppo. And Helmeppo was being kind of a dickhead, so Zoro had to clobber him. and that made them, capture Zoro. And they basically gave him a condition: hey, if you can be crucified out here for 30 days, we'll let you free after that. And you get a feel for Zoro's just unrealistic willpower to endure, because he thinks he can do it, even though any normal human should be dead after a few days of just standing out in the hot sun without food or water. You get this cool scene where this little girl attempts to bring him rice balls, but she doesn't know how to cook, and the Helmeppo dude steals one from her and stomps all over it because it tastes like shit. But Zoro doesn't care, even though he knows it tastes like shit and it's been stomped into the ground. He asks Luffy to feed it to him, and he does. And this gives Luffy a good impression of who Zoro is, so it kind of makes him even more determined to have him join his crew, but he knows he doesn't want to yet. But then when Luffy's back in town, he hears Helmeppo say that in a few more days they're just going to execute him and they're going to go back on his promise. This sends Luffy into a fit of rage, so he punches Helmeppo and then goes to Zoro and says, hey, where are your swords at? I'm gonna go get them. And Zoro's like, well, they're probably over there, but I told you I don't want any part of this. And Luffy's like, cool, I'm gonna go get your swords. And so Luffy goes and gets the swords, and while Luffy's getting the swords, Kobe clues in Zoro on, hey, yeah, these people kind of just didn't hold up their part of the bargain. They were gonna execute you anyway. So this sort of causes Zoro to start reflecting a bit. And when Luffy does make it back later, that's sort of the turning point where Zoro's like, you know what, fuck it, I'll join the pirate crew. What's the difference between a pirate hunter and being part of a pirate crew? I'm already known as a demon, so I can turn coat and become a pirate, and it doesn't really make much of a difference as long as I can still be the best swordsman in the world. And Luffy's like, oh, cool, great, because a pirate king would need no less than that. You get a little bit before that, you get a better feel for Axe Hand Morgan, where he looks so far down upon his son that he's like, dude, the reason I've never beat you is because you're so beneath me that you're not worth my time. I only beat people that defy me. And you see he's willing to execute people for so much as questioning him or accidentally digging this giant statue monument they're trying to put up. So he's basically the scum of the earth. And then he's easily thwarted by him, and his son are easily thwarted by Luffy and Zoro in a confrontation. And so Kobe decides to stay with Axe Hand Morgan defeated. You realize that most of the Marines were being ruled under a tyrannical leader. Most of them weren't bad or anything. And so with Axe Hand Morgan out of the way, Kobe decides to stay in the village and become a Marine himself. And so Luffy and Zoro go on without Kobe. They all salute because they realize that even though they were pirates, they were also their saviors. At Zoro's backstory, we see that he had a female childhood friend that was better at swordplay at him, and her name was Quina, and she was terrified that as they were going to get older, Zoro's ability, natural physical traits of being a man would supersede hers. And Zoro's like, nah, that's not fair, you're my rival, so you need to keep going and we need to keep fighting. And then she kind of just suddenly dies, and it's kind of jarring even on rereads because I feel like there's more to this, but we still don't have it. So whereas right now we're entering like the closing parts of One Piece, like it's entering its final saga, I really do hope we wrap around to this. Honestly, I've just never bought the, oh, she fell on the stairs and died. And a large part of that is because Zoro, the author has a hard time killing his characters unless it's in backstories. And while I know this is a backstory, because the like actual death itself isn't shown, I always just feel skeptical of that in anime and manga. Like it always feels like there's more to it. So I am going to be a little disappointed if that ends up being the case, if this is just a, oh, she just died and that's all there is to it. Because I feel like there's a lot to unpack here, and I feel like we could do a lot more with Zoro. I think Zoro's a great character, but this backstory is something I've always wanted more on. But anyway, with the death of his friend, he asks for her sword, and Zoro was a two-sword style user before this, but ever since he took Quina's sword, he now uses three swords, two in hand, one in mouth. It's silly, but that's kind of what One Piece is. Absolute nonsense, but with some deeper substance when you continue onward. It balances a lot of its darker stuff with just absolute buffoonery, and it really does get good when you get used to it, and when you get to some of the heavier stuff. Luffy and Zoro are on their way to Orangetown, even if they don't know where they're really going, but they're talking about what crew members they need. Zoro's like, shit, we probably need a navigator because we don't know we don't know what we're doing here. And Luffy's like, I think we also need a cook and a musician. And Zoro's like, yeah, well, those seem kind of less important right now. Those can probably wait. And Luffy just sees a giant bird and is like, yo, food, let's go. And then Luffy gets carried away on the bird. So this is a structure that we're going to see a lot. Oda likes to split the crew up, even when it's just the two of them. It makes for some interesting dynamics because a lot of these arcs are set up in a way where the crew gets scattered and them coming back together is a huge thing, and you get to sort of follow more in-depth solo adventures of each character. And I don't think it's super necessary early on. Sometimes it can actually be annoying, but I'm the type of person that wants characters in a story to have their chances to shine. So later on, when the crew starts getting bigger and diverse, I actually like it because it gives characters more time to shine on individual levels, which is usually necessary for me to really care about a story. So I appreciate that is his writing style, because other shonen have burned me in the past by introducing a character that I think is cool and then doing jack all with them. That happens very seldomly in this series, and it plays a large part of why I love it so much. So Luffy finally arrives in Orangetown after being dropped down by a bird. Nami sees this, and we get introduced to Nami. She's a very roguelike character. We get an impression of that pretty quickly on because she pretends Luffy's her boss so that Luffy takes the fall, with her seeing a bunch of pirates, and she hates pirates, but she basically just runs away, and Luffy's forced to deal with these thugs that he just bumped into. And then Nami starts talking to him to try to get a feel for him. And then meanwhile, Zoro's sailing, and he bumps into three stranded pirates in the middle of the ocean, and he's like, I'm not stopping, I gotta get to land, you gotta make it on. And there's a pretty great panel transition where on one panel the three of them are threatening Zoro, and then in the next panel they're the ones rowing the boat as Zoro's just chilling now because they fucked around and found out. And so that's pretty much the end of this volume. We are name dropped the name Buggy the Clown, but we don't really know anything about him yet. You know, and yeah, that's volume 1. It's honestly, it's a pretty good start to the series. As someone who's read the whole thing, I think there's going to be some arcs coming up where I think the series falters a bit in terms of pacing. I really do think that the first volume sets this great epic story up, and then because the authors, you know, like we have to build a crew, so we have to have these small, humble beginnings to grow into what the series is today, and in a sense that can be hard to balance. I think I enjoy it more on rereads, because I think on my first watch, because of being used to more action-packed shonens, this series is more like early Dragon Ball at its inception. It has a lot of comedy and gags going for it, and similar to Dragon Ball, if you've ever read original Dragon Ball, it doesn't become a real powerhouse in in-depth storytelling until a few arcs into its adventure. But that's been my first discussion for Volume 1 of One Piece. I'm very excited to continue talking about this. I'm going to be attempting to post videos every Monday for manga discussion, if you weren't already aware, so I hope you'll join me next week as we dive into Volume 2 of One Piece, and maybe even start another series with another manga that I'm hoping to be starting blind soon. But that's all for now. Thanks for watching, YouTube. Take it easy.